Well, hello, everybody. I'm here today with Dr. Pamela Prickett, who wrote this book that came out last year, The Unclaimed, Abandonment and Hope in the City of Angels. She co-authored this with Stephen Timmermans. And this past June, Pamela, we were so lucky to have her at the Funeral Consumers Alliance Biennial Conference as our keynote speaker. And as things happen at conferences, people were busy and scurrying around, and a lot of our speakers were unable to get to the media corner. So we're doing this little podcast interview with Pamela today. Pamela, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this and share with all those people who will come to our platform to learn more.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for welcoming me in June as your keynote speaker. It was just fantastic to be around a group of people who are so committed to doing something about funeral poverty and to kind of fight these growing social problems.
Yeah. So I've just got a few questions.
Okay.
And first of all, I'd like you just to introduce your book a little bit. It came out last year, published by Crown. And what would you like people most to know about it?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share about the book. So this is a book, it's in the genre of narrative nonfiction, and we take you into the lives of four Angelinos, so four people in Los Angeles who are at risk of going unclaimed. And we kind of take you through their lives sort of before, during, and after the process of when the county of Los Angeles gets involved. And one of the things that I just would love for people to understand is just even what it means to go unclaimed. So what does that mean? And we've always had potter's fields, right? With the poor and unmarked graves and indigent burials. But today, Americans from all walks of life are at risk of going unclaimed. So we estimate that between 2 to 4% of the 3 million Americans who die every year are at risk in going unclaimed. So that's up to 150,000 Americans. And to put that in perspective, that's more than the number of Americans who die from diabetes every year, right? And the number is increasing. So, it's very difficult to tell people exact numbers because the federal government doesn't track this. Most states don't track this. But Maryland is one of the few states that has kept track of unclaimed deaths. And they find that the percentage has more than doubled in 20 years. And so we argue in the book that these deaths serve as a very sensitive barometer of kin support at the end of life. And it turns out that, more relatives are choosing or opting not to participate in burial or cremation for their relatives, or maybe they can't afford to organize a burial. And so, and there's also, a lot that we touch on in the book, a lot that will resonate with people. We talk about these entwined epidemics of loneliness, isolation, family estrangement, eroding social ties, right? And more of us are at risk of maybe not having somebody there with us at end of life to organize our funeral. And that puts us at risk of being buried by strangers. And so we're really looking at what that means. And if this is a fundamental shift in American society, what are we going to do about it, right? And so the other thing I would say is, like, hope is in the subtitle for a reason, right? Stefan and I found that there are communities and people coming together to organize burials for the unclaimed. And for me, it's just America at its best. Strangers showing up for strangers, coming across differences, honoring people they didn't know, but who are human beings and deserve dignity. And so I really encourage people to kind of read the book for that reason, to sort of have a little bit of light in a dark tunnel.
So well said. Yeah, I could remember you saying funeral poverty just doesn't mean because you're poor. Somebody just may say, I'm not, I don't care. I mean, we were estranged or whatever. What are the questions you're asked most often? As you've had a lot of speaking tours, by the way, if you're ever back to, towards the East Coast, do let us know. We'll be sure to let your fan base know.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so it kind of connects to what you had just mentioned at the end. I think a big question that I often get is, well, isn't this just about money, right? People don't have the money to organize a funeral. And one of the surprising findings for me in these many years, these 8 years of research that Stefan and I put into this book, is that um, money is one part of the equation, but it's often not the key part of the equation. It's not the most proximate reason that somebody is going unclaimed, right? And the reasons people go unclaimed is because who's asked to step up isn't always the right person. It's not based on the quality of the relationship. It's based on a very specific legal tie, a legal definition of who is next of kin. And so I teach my book as well at Pomona College, and I have these, young people between 18 and 22 in my classroom, and they read the book, and at the end they go, it never crossed my mind that a close friend, for example, couldn't claim me. And so I think Americans need to understand that, yeah, there's a really specific definition of who's allowed to claim you right now. And that's a big surprise. And I think also just like I'm seeing a lot of references to family estrangement now in leading newspapers, a lot of podcasts about it. And I think that this book was published just in advance of that discussion really starting to take off. And we show you kind of the extreme consequences of this epidemic of rising family estrangement. And I think it surprises folks and they want to know more. And I think those things are connected, right? Like, who do you have to claim you? And is the law going to recognize that?
Finally, as you know, and the reason I wanted you at our conference, our focus at this year's Funeral Consumers Alliance conference was on confronting funeral poverty in our communities. And so please review 3 key actionable steps or strategies, the takeaways for the listeners, so they can implement these in their local areas.
Yes, absolutely. So for the folks who couldn't join us in beautiful Raleigh-Durham, let me tell you 3 things that I told the audience. The first connects to this idea of next of kin. We need to have a wider public discussion about who counts as the best person to claim, right? Who counts as family and who's the best person to claim. So as I told the folks in the audience, right now disposition remains with relatives and specifically the legal next of kin. At the same time, there's rising complexity in family life. So we have more multi-generational families, more step families, more cohabitation without marriage. We also have more people living alone than ever before. And so we need to be talking to folks to think like, who do you expect to claim you? And then fighting these narrow definitions, right, of who is next of kin. So I think the second thing, is to change the narrative about what makes for a good funeral for the indigent and the unclaimed. And this is where I think, we have the most opportunity to do something positive and feel good about the work that we're all engaged in. Too often we hide the unclaimed. We try to have these kind of hidden secret burials. We see it as stigmatized, and we want to, if they don't have money, they're often put in unmarked graves or cremated. In some places in California, I know, they scatter the ashes at sea, right? With just a private boat taking them out to sea. If somebody has assets, they might get a private lonely funeral. But I'm not sure that's really doing anything for the unclaimed or for us. Instead, I want to encourage people to look at the book and to also do some research on these kind of beautiful community events that people are organizing for the Unclaimed. So in Los Angeles, every December, the county chaplains for the public hospital organize this beautiful interfaith multilingual service. It's about 30, 35 minutes, depending on how many politicians show up to make a speech. But it's this finely calibrated, beautiful community event. And it's one of the reasons I actually decided to do this research, because I went to the first one of those in December of 2015, and it brought tears to my eyes. And I was standing beside people that I never would have come into contact with before. And we were all there to serve a common purpose, to honor people that we didn't know, but we felt deserved dignity. And I think there's something really beautiful about that. And we should be advocating on the behalf of the unclaimed to get these kind of community events rather than the secret hidden funeral. And that's something that, members of the Funeral Consumers Alliance can be really actively involved in. And I really encourage them to do that. And then related to that, I would say the third thing is to really expand your definition of who a consumer is. So more often than not, the unclaimed will have no one advocating for them, right? So the people legally designated to organize and to advocate have declined to be involved. And so the unclaimed are at the mercy of local governments and people who are willing to stand up, volunteers. And so I've been touched by the number of people who've reached out to me in the last year since the book came out, and they want to do something and getting advice and kind of just, thinking about the unclaimed is almost the first part of doing something about it, right? Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Pamela. You were a smashing success with a message that all of us heard and want to take action about. Thank you. I will stop the recording now.